Hello, and welcome to this guide on how to play Balanced Druid in Cataclysm Classic. In this guide, we'll be looking at optimal talents, rotation, gearing, and the Balanced Druid WeakAura. I want to give a huge shout out to Sabi and Shanti from the Druid Discord for putting this information together. When it comes to talents, most are more or less set in stone, with a few exceptions. These exceptions are how you spend your points when it comes to Moonglow, Alchemy Frenzy, Gale Winds, Fungal Growth, and Furor. Most of these are highly situational, and what is considered the best choice varies from fight to fight. We will go through these specific talents in order for you to make your own educated pick. I personally don't struggle with mana in my current gear, which lets me move points away from Moonglow and move them into Gale Winds. I do this to squeeze out a little extra C damage on Ragnaros. I also chose to run 2 points in Fungal Growth and 1 point in Furor, instead of running 3 points in Alchemy Frenzy. This is due to Alchemy Frenzy not really being a valuable pick in Firelands, as it doesn't proc very much. To start off the optional talents, we have Moonglow, a talent that reduces the mana cost of your damage and healing spells. At rank 1 it reduces the mana cost by 3%, at rank 2 by 6%, and at rank 3 by 9%. This talent is a great pick if you feel that you're struggling with mana. Next up we have Gale Winds, a talent that increases the damage of Hurricane and Typhoon by 15% at rank 1 and 30% at rank 2. In addition to this, it increases the range of your Cyclone spell by 2 and 4 yards respectively. Alchemy Frenzy is a talent that, which at max rank, gives attack stun you a 15% chance to increase your damage by 10% and make you immune to pushback when casting balance spells for 10 seconds. This can be a pretty great talent, but sadly it doesn't proc much in Firelands, making it a very minor DPS difference. Fungal Growth is a talent that at max rank makes your wild mushrooms spawn fungal growth in an 8-yard radius, which slows enemies by 50% at rank 2. This can be exceptionally useful on Bethilak if you don't have a hunter helping you deal with spiderlings. Last but not least, we have Furor, which lets you instantly get 33 energy when going into cat form. It's generally recommended to place 1 point into this if you want to run it. This is also situationally useful in case you need to use Stampeding Roar, for example. When it comes to prime glyphs, we run Glyph of Insect Swarm, Glyph of Moonfire, and Glyph of Wrath. For major glyphs, I recommend running Glyph of Monsoon, Glyph of Starfall, as well as Glyph of Rebirth. Your minor glyphs are a lot more flexible, but I personally run Glyph of Dash, Glyph of Mark of the Wild, and Glyph of Unburdened Rebirth. When it comes to picking a race, I always recommend just playing what you feel you resonate with the most, but if you're going for max DPS, we'll go through your options now. On the Alliance side, Worgen will be the best choice due to their 1% crit ratio. They perform about 1% ahead of Night Elf in terms of DPS output. As for Horde, Troll is by far the best choice, as well as the best choice overall. This is due to their racial berserking, which is like a personal mini-lust. In addition to this, they have the racial beast slaying, which provide an extra 5% damage against beasts, which can be useful on some fights. They are roughly 1% DPS ahead of Tauren, except on beast fights where they are roughly 6% ahead of Taurus. Before we start talking about the rotation itself, I highly advise to use the Balanced Druid WeakAura made by Sabi. You can find a link for this in the description. The WeakAura features a dot snapshotting calculator, which recommends you when to refresh your dots and how much stronger or weaker they are at any given time. In addition to this, the WeakAura features a fake Q feature, which allows you to queue up an instant spell on the cast that will lead you into an Eclipse, which allows that instant spell to be affected by the Eclipse bonus. We'll talk about fake Q more in depth in the WeakAura section of the video. Balanced Druids have a unique mechanic, the Eclipse system. The Eclipse system revolves around a meter that swings between solar and lunar energy as you cast specific spells. Your solar eclipse increases the damage of your nature spells, while lunar eclipse increases the damage of your arcane spells. The spells you use in your rotation that are affected by solar eclipse are Sunfire, Wrath, and Wild Mushrooms. The spells used in rotation that are affected by lunar eclipse are Moonfire, Starfire, and Starfall. Your Star Surge and Insect Swarm are boosted by both solar and lunar eclipse. The Balanced Druid rotation is a very dynamic rotation which relies heavily on dot management, uptime, and snapshotting. You want to always have your dots up and have them be affected by Eclipse, as well as always having them be the strongest they can be. Outside of dots, the rotation consists of using Star Search on cooldown, with some exceptions, or using the appropriate filler spell. When moving from Lunar towards Solar, the appropriate filler is Starfire, and while moving from Solar to Lunar, the appropriate filler is Wrath. You also want to use Starfall right when you reach Lunar Eclipse to make sure it's affected for its whole duration by the eclipse. This is the basic gist of our rotation, however in reality it is more like a priority system of what spells to use when. Before the fight starts, you will want to pre-place 3 wild mushrooms where the boss will be when you reach your first solar eclipse. You want to hold off detonating these until you reach solar, as solar boosts the damage done by your shrooms. Pre-pot your volcanic potion and pre-cast Starfire. Be wary of how long the cast time of your Starfire is, as you don't want to ninja pull. After your precast is finished, you will want to use Force of Nature if you're not delaying Bloodlust, as they need to be active when Lust is used in order to benefit from the effect. Next step is to use Moonfire in order to trigger Nature's Grace, which increases your haste by 15%. Nature's Grace is the only reason we apply Moonfire out of Eclipse here. If you haven't gone Variable Pulse Lightning Capacitor yet, and are still using Thoralian's Mirror for your trinket, you can use Starfall here as well to fish for procs. After this, use Starfire until you reach Solar Eclipse. When you reach Solar Eclipse, don't forget to use your Wild Mushroom Detonate, as Detonate is off GCD, so I personally use it when putting up my dots. In-game, the opener will look something like this. I pre-place my 3 wild mushrooms and get ready to pre-pod. My Starfire has a cast time of about 2.1 seconds, so I wait until close to that. Pop it, Starfire, into Force of Nature, into Moonfire, Starfall to proc Mirror, and then I Starfire to get into Solar. Right here I reapply my dots with the new Eclipse bonus, where I do Insect Swarm first into Sunfire. This is to allow Insect Swarm to proc Nature's Grace, so that Sunfire will be affected by it. After the opener, our rotation turns into a priority system, where keeping dots up and as strong as possible is your first priority, and using Star Search on CD and proc is prio number 2. This is unless you are going from Lunar to Solar and your energy is at 0, 25, 50 or 75, as using Star Search then will delay your Eclipse. And last but not least, you're supposed to use the appropriate filler. You should also use Starfall when you reach Lunar if it's off cooldown. You should also use Force of Nature off cooldown. Other than Force of Nature, we don't have any class-specific cooldowns. However, with Troll Rational and Engineering, you can have 2 more. Try to combine these with Trinket procs in your potion in order to get the juiciest dots possible. Here's an example of how to use the rotation. Put up Insect Swarm first, followed by Moonfire, in order for Moonfire to benefit from Nature's Grace. And then use the appropriate filler to move from Lunar to Solar. I don't use Star Search here, because it will delay how fast I get into Solar Eclipse. Keep a lookout on the dots and the values that are under them on the left side of the WeakAura and see how they dynamically change depending on what trinkets are up or what procs are up. You can always follow this WeakAura to know when to refresh your dots and when not to, as when they are green, it's been calculated that it's then worth the GCD to spend on refreshing the dot. Try to keep up the most powerful dots at all time and don't clip those. In multi-target fights, the rotation differs a little bit. This is if the fight involves 2 to 3 targets. Your priority then is to keep up dots on all active targets in order to maximize your DPS. If the fight involves 4+ targets, we change the rotation more or less entirely. Here it's recommended to use Thoralian's Mirror as well as Moonwheel Chalice for your trinkets in order to stack Mastery for a juicy Solar Eclipse. If you didn't know, Mastery increases the damage increase of your Eclipse. This rotation involves getting into Solar with Mirror procced and Chalice activated, then popping your mushrooms. After this, your priority is to use mushrooms on CD and keep Sunfire up on every target. If you've placed your shrooms, Detonate is on CD, Sunfire is up on every target, and you still have time left, you can start putting up Insect Swarm on these targets. If all the previous criteria are filled, you can use Hurricane. This is mostly useful on Lord Rylith and Bethtilak right now. I have a video on my channel of how to do this on Rhyolith if you're interested in seeing it in action. Before we start talking about actual gear, we should first talk about stat priorities. Our stat priority list is as follows: Intellect, Spell Power, Hit Rating, Spirit, up to hit cap, Haste, Mastery, Crit. When it comes to haste, there are several breakpoints which can provide a big DPS increase as they allow your dots to take more times during their duration. You will have to sim your gear with different gems/enchant combinations to see if reaching these breakpoints are worth it for you, as it differs from gear set to gear set. If you're close to reaching one of these breakpoints, it places haste at the top of the stat priority, even over intellect. It is also worth noting that even after reaching a breakpoint, haste is still a better stat for us than mastery and crit. This is your absolute best in slot for Firelands and which you should try to go for. However, Sabi has compiled a great spreadsheet with different alternative gear setups you can also go for. You can find it linked in the description along with the Wowhead page featuring alternative biz items. When it comes to reforging, we don't recommend using the Reforge Lite presets like many other classes. Instead, we recommend using the Suggest Reforge feature on WoW Sims. You can export your gear right from the game using the WoW Sims Exporter add-on and then easily import it into WoW Sims. When you've imported your gear, simply press Suggest Reforges and then export to JSON. When you've copied your export string, go to any Reforger in game and press the Import WoW Sims button in Reforge Lite. If you want to play around more with your gear, like regemming and re-enchanting, as this isn't done automatically, feel free to do this in WoW Sims before exporting your gear. For the last part of this guide, I want to speak a bit about the Balanced Druid WeakAura pack by Sabi. This contains everything you need in one neat package, and the biggest thing in my opinion is the dot snapshotting calculator we talked about earlier, as it massively helps in order to keep up the best dots you can. Another big part of the WeakAura is the fake queue I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to go too much into detail about it here, as I recommend reading the guide written by Sabi instead. You can find this document in the description. In summary, fake queue introduces a slight lag to your game, allowing you to queue an instant spell just before entering an Eclipse. Without this lag, the game treats the spell as if it were cast outside of Eclipse, and you miss out on the bonus. By adding the lag, the spell benefits from the Eclipse bonus instead. To set this up, you need to manually find your absolute offsets. Instructions for this is included in the document, as well as macroing your Insect Swarm and Star Surge, in case you enter Eclipse with a Star Surge proc, to include fake queue. I'll probably make a guide for how to set all this up in the coming week or two, and when it's out, I'll put a link in a pinned comment. I've also put together a list of other useful macros which you can find in the description. That's it for this video. I hope it helps you get a better grip of how to play Balanced Druid. I highly recommend reading through the Wowhead guide in full as well, and if you want to get even more tips and tricks, the Druid Discord is a fantastic place. Thanks for watching, and make sure to leave a comment if you have any questions.